Hey guys, today I'm going to be doing my final update on Hate the board game, as well as some lingering questions we still have leading up to the Kickstarter launch on January 16th. These updates are based off of some recent Facebook updates, as well as a large gameplay update that was posted on the CMON website called How to Hate, a Guide to Survival. So let's get on to the goal of the game. We actually have a goal now that we are working towards. So the goal is to earn conquest points by taking over territories and completing objectives, though after the final clash these points are added to the lowest amount of resources or hate, and that is the final score. This is an interesting mechanic because while it means you're going after these victory points or these conquest points, you can't just strictly go for them and negate actually playing the game so much, right? You can't just rush them or something like that, because it's added to your lowest amount of resource, whether it's what they just call resources or hate. In other words, if you have 2 hate, but 5, conquest points, then you only have 7 total points at the end. If somebody has 8 hate, and that's their lowest, then they've won, right? And so you need to both play the game well and get these victory points. So it's almost like the victory points accentuate your game as opposed to decide your game. A very interesting mechanic, and it'll be interesting to see how much you can game that. We'll have to crunch the numbers or just kind of get a feel for that. But a very interesting way to do it, and I do like that. Now, they added a lot about the combat of the game, so let's dig into that in a bit more detail. Players alternate being the attacking and defending tribe for a territory. Each class has a scenario picked which informs the players where to place hills and huts and trees and interest tokens, as well as what side and main missions are available. So, in other words, let's say I'm the aggressor or I'm the attacking player and there's a defending tribe, right? The defending tribe owns 3 territories and then there are 4 territories that are neutral. I can only pick those territories. Now, I don't know exactly how the territories work. I didn't really see much on the board game, the actual board that they showed. But either way, we'll do that, and then we'll pick a scenario. I'm assuming the scenarios might be based off of the territory, so it's more of picking your selection of scenarios. But we'll see on that. The scenario will essentially have the board map where it shows where to place everything, as well as the objective of the scenario. In a clash, players have 4 rounds with alternating turns. Actions are activated by using savagery tokens, and the round is over when a player is out of savagery tokens or the victory condition is met. This is kind of an interesting mechanic that I kind of like. The last one I experienced was with Conan, but essentially you have this resource, in this case, savagery tokens that are this finite resource, and you use that to really do anything in the game. So it's not a game where it's like you get 3 turns on your round. And you get to move, or you get to attack, or you get to do a skill. Instead, you have these savagery tokens, and you use those to do different things. Now, once they're used, you don't really get them back, or at least not as much typically, and that's how it kind of lessens until eventually you're done. In each clash, players have access to 2 tribe cards, which are placed face up at the start of battle. They can only be used once and are discarded afterwards, used or not. Each card contains a trigger and a cost for savagery token to use. Now this is kind of interesting that, first of all, you might have a tribe deck, but you're only ever going to be able to do 2 of them at once. Kind of disappointing, but, I don't know. It depends on how random of a draw that is and whether or not it, some don't make sense in certain scenarios, or I don't know. We'll have to see kind of what that is. It's not what I was thinking the tribe deck would do, though. Additionally, it's face up, which means not only do you get to see them, but so does your opponent. And because it has a trigger effect, which essentially I'm assuming means if let's say the tribe is dogpile, then you have to surround the enemy with your units or something like that, perhaps, right? So you can't use it out of context. That makes sense. And then it costs a certain amount of savagery tokens. That makes sense as well. However, if it shows you have to surround a unit and you need 3 savagery tokens, if your opponent, who also can see that card, sees you only have 2 savagery tokens, they don't have to worry about it. Or they can just simply avoid being surrounded. Right? And so there's that kind of play as well on maybe you're trying to trigger it, but they're trying to have you not. Or maybe they know you can't because you don't have enough savagery tokens. Kind of an interesting mechanic there. The village continues to play a role in combat, allowing the use of savagery tokens at the forge for extras such as additional movement, an extra dice, or an additional activation. So that's kind of interesting. We knew the forge played a role, but we didn't know exactly what it did. So it looks like it can add dice, it can just add movement, or it can add a whole other activation. It probably depends on how much savagery tokens you use. Replenish simply includes discarding tribe cards and spent savagery tokens, gaining 5 savagery tokens, and then drawing 2 new tribe cards. During activation, tokens can be used to pillage, chop trees, kill units, or drag them away. So essentially, you have to use these savagery tokens to, do all this stuff, and then in replenishment, you get some back. Now, how that plays, is it going to be a whole lot of these, or are you going to only really have maybe up to 3 activations? Not sure. We'll have to see. Dice are the basic sword versus shield rolls with wild and skulls as extra symbols, and that's used in combat. That is so boring, and I'm so disappointed to see this. It's just been done to death. It's not original. It's not necessarily even that exciting. It just, I don't know, to me it's so ho-hum. Not that it's bad, it's just I've done it in so many games lately. It's not that unique. And when you have these cards and when you have these miniatures, I hoped there would be more play in that. It sounds to me like it might even just be dice manipulation, because there's a whole tribe that does dice manipulation, which is essentially all of Massive Darkness. That's the only way you can do anything, is just manipulating dice. And I worry this might be the same thing. It sounds like if you have this big bad tyrant mercenary that he'll just say, oh, I roll the purple die, and the purple die is better than the green die, so I tend to have more swords. That's not exactly exciting. And then he has a skill where it's +2 swords. Woohoo? I mean, I don't know. I can't get excited about that, and this is probably the most disappointing news that I've had on this when it comes to combat. It just seems rather unfortunate. And then, of course, depending on the roll, maybe he rolls bad, and maybe there's a blank on all dice, and so the tyrant is as a swing and a miss, big bad guy, and he's going against some little young blood guy, and he rolls awesome defense, happen chance. That, I don't know, that the randomness is kind of unfortunate, especially if there's not a way to mitigate it. So my main problem with Massive Darkness is being unable to mitigate after the fact, or, you can't do anything. The dice roll is a die roll, and that's it. So, I don't know, that's kind of blah. It depends on what the wilds and skulls do. I imagine skulls deal wounds, and wilds you can use as either or you use it as for an ability. I don't know. We'll see. I'm assuming they're just like BAMs and diamonds from Massive Darkness, or any other symbol from any other game that does this. Okay, lastly, during the next battle and scenario, the roles of the players will be reversed. So the aggressor then becomes the defender, and the defender the aggressor, and you pick the next clash, scenario and territory and all that. It works. It seems kind of odd to me that it's this, I guess it's a constant back and forth, and that makes sense, but it just, if you were just attacked and, we killed 3 of your dudes and there's only 11 of you, then you're going to go on the offensive. It just, I don't know. It's whatever. I'm indifferent on that, I suppose. Okay, for the last bit of news, I'm going to go over figure cards and mercenaries. So, figure cards accompany each tribe member, stating their type, stats, and starting abilities. These cards are sleeved, and new abilities and scars are contained on transparent cards that overlay the figure card. This is kind of interesting. Now, essentially, I'm assuming stats are, you can move this far, you roll these die, that kind of boring stuff that isn't very exciting. However, they do have, abilities and stuff like that. And when you get, let's say, a wound, I'm assuming you put it into this sleeve, and it overlays their card and adds maybe an ability and maybe change. So like if maybe you have a broken leg, and so it reduces your movement, and so it actually overlays the number with a new one, perhaps, or something like that. That'd be kind of cool, or changes your die that you roll, or it's kind of neat. It's kind of interesting that it's overlaid with sleeves and stuff like that. I guess it's easy to save from clash to clash, which is kind of cool. I still think maybe magnets would have worked better. They did that in Chaos Bowl, and I thought it worked pretty well. That was also an Eric Lang game from CMON, so I don't know. I guess we'll see on that, but very interesting idea. And mercenaries. So these are units that can replace a unit of the tribe that fall or that you just want to replace, and come with their own preset abilities. Certain conditions must be met to add them. Now this leads me to my first lingering questions. How are we hiring these mercenaries? So in the Facebook update on the Tyrant, for instance, was just a huge guy with like skulls and hooks, so like all down his waist, and it looks really cool, and he's really big. And I believe he's important in the graphic novel. Anyway, it talks about how he'll only follow the strong. Does that mean he's, you have to fight him, or he's appearing on the clash? and he's like an NPC. If I have to fight him and it's outside of the clash, does that mean another person's controlling him? Is it an NPC and the other person doesn't play? I don't know how that works. Or is it simply, again, rolling dice to resolve a test, which would be, again, super boring. Hey, do you want this big, expensive guy? Well, you have to roll 3 or higher on strength. Woohoo. I mean, I don't know. I guess it would work and it makes sense, and it might work better than some of the alternatives I quickly thought of off the top of my head. But first of all, hopefully they've designed this not just off the top of their head, and they can do something more exciting than rolling a 3+ to get this cool tyrant guy. So we'll see on that. Also, their skills. It says that they come pre-made with skills. Are these unique skills, or is it just that the tyrant is a certain type of character? Because if that's the case, maybe my, champion warrior, I happen to build the same way. So he's essentially just another champion warrior with no difference. Or is it with unique skills that where the tyrant is the tyrant and he's different than all the others? I would much prefer that. And that's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping he has his own unique skills, and each one of these mercenaries are different than anybody else you could have. So then you can decide whether or not that's worth it, or if you like what you've built more. Also, how are the designer credits going to work? So I mentioned Eric Lang, and Board Game Geek, mentions him, and some other articles do as well. And he is head of pretty much all of game development over there, so he kind of at least oversees it all. But they've also mentioned, Alex Altanua. I can't pronounce his last name. I apologize. They mentioned, the creators of Massive Darkness and Zombicide. So is this a group effort where everybody's pitching in, or is there one guy putting the majority of it in? And if so, is it 60% or 90%? Additionally, how are you going to credit that? So if it is mainly one person, are you going to say this guy? And if so, is it going to be at 60 or 90, right? Is it really that guy's game or not? Or are you just going to simply say a CMON game and not actually put a name on there? Is this now getting to the point where the industry is moving more towards games by companies instead of people, or at least a specific person? And, it'll be interesting to see what the pros and cons of that kind of development is. For so long, we've only really developed games with, 1 to 2 people really, helming it and going off with it, and 90% of it's theirs. What happens when everybody gets to add a little bit? Does that bring everything and elevate it up? Or does that diminish it and make things not unique? I don't know. I don't know what the answers to that. And it'll be interesting to see both how much it actually was, if we ever do find that out, but additionally how they credit it. Maybe every CMON game in the foreseeable future is going to be an Eric Lang game, and it'll just become synonymous with CMON. I don't know. So it'll be interesting. Additionally, price. How much is this going to cost on Kickstarter? Now, when it comes to Kickstarter, there is the entry-level price, to get the core box plus stretch goals, and then there is the final price if you want everything. And that can be hundreds of dollars different. So what is this going to be? I don't foresee it being any more than Massive Darkness, which was $120. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if it's $100, which was for Rising Sun, which was another recent one they had. So it could be that. I'm assuming everything we've seen, all the components, all of the miniatures are part of the core game. It'd be really sketchy of them to release a stretch goal mini or a additional buy mini leading up to this. That's not how you hype the core box game. That seems odd to me. However, this is only a 2-player game, and not everybody wants to spend $300 on 2 players. It's fine. Tabletop goes way beyond that, so I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying I don't know if that's necessarily what they're going to go for. Additionally, I don't know how much you can expand this. I have not read the graphic novels, but my understanding is there are certain factions and kind of people that you could add on to. But how much total? I don't know. I don't know if and maybe they focus more on component upgrades. Though typically those are stretch goals anyway. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I'm assuming there will at least be a Kickstarter exclusive tribe. I would not be surprised for that. This is CMON and they tend to do that. I wouldn't be surprised if there are additional tribes you can add on. And maybe they can do some like mercenary packs, though maybe those are all stretch goals, because you remember they have to do this in stretch goals too. So a lot of what would normally be, an add-on might only be a stretch goal. And in fact, Hate might be a one-off game. In other words, they're not planning on adding additional buys over and over again. And so instead, it's maybe you just have different tiers, and they'll do that, like, kind of a lot of other companies do, where it's like you can back at the 100 or you can back at the 200, and they come with different things. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see. Also, we've seen a lot of the miniatures, but they've all been humanoid. Now that's fine, and I don't mind it, but I am interested to see if there will be non-humanoid miniatures. You know, they've had kind of a Minotaur kind of like guy, and they've had the Clayman and stuff like that, but they're still humanoid. Is there going to be like some weird monster thing that isn't? That'd be interesting to know. Additionally, game time. How long is this game going to take? Is this a 4-hour game, or is this a 30-minute game? If it's depending on how many clashes or battles you do, how long is a battle? Is a battle 10 minutes? Or is a battle 60 minutes? Or is a battle 20? Or, 2 hours? I don't know. And so that really depends on whether or not this is, maybe it's like a legacy game where the Chronicle it takes 20 hours to complete, and each clash is several hours. Or maybe it's, kind of quick battles, and then you go to your village, and then you battle again, and then you go to your village, and you battle again. And it's more of a combat phase than a battle, per se. In other words, as the scenario isn't like a whole game in and of itself. I don't know. Which brings me to my last lingering question, and that is the campaign mode tacked on like the story mode for Massive Darkness was? Now, I'd be worried about this not worried, but I'd be questioning this either way. I'm worried about it because, like I said, in the story mode for Massive Darkness is very much a game meant to be played with one-off scenarios. And then they made it able to play a story, but that's not really how you should. Right? It doesn't work quite as well. It's not as streamlined. It's not balanced at all. So it wasn't even really play tested to the, how tight the other version of it is. And so, that brings a little bit of worry to this question, I suppose. But also just fundamentally, is this a skirmish game or is this a campaign game? Does campaign mean a story? Or does it just mean picking a whole bunch of skirmishes? Because the article they mentioned talked about how all it is essentially two people deciding on how many clashes they'd have, and that's the Chronicle. And then they pick the scenarios. So does that mean, let's say there are 5 scenarios. Scenario 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And those are the different map layouts and missions, right? And then I, sit with Joe Schmo and say, hey, Joe, do you want to play, three battles? And he's like, no, the battles are all 2 hours. Let's just play 2 and play for 4 hours. So I say, okay, I'll pick clash or scenario 2 and 5. And that's it. That's not necessarily a campaign mode. I mean, maybe it is. Or is it, it's 2 hours, let's just play 2. And if it's just playing 1, right, if it's just a skirmish, how do mercenaries work there? Does a village even really come into effect there? How do I build abilities? Is there a way to play with just one skirmish? Or a skirmish is only 10 minutes and it doesn't matter? So part of it's based off game time, but part of it is really based off of how they're designing the game. And you can do it both, right? Star Wars Imperial Assault by Fantasy Flight Games is a great game, both as a skirmish and as a campaign. In a campaign, it is multiple missions that are all unique, that have a story that work, with progression that works. Or as a skirmish game, it has a whole different rule set that works really well as a skirmish game. So it can do both, and you can as well. I'm just interested to see if it works like that, if it's pretty much strictly a campaign mode, or if it's best to only play as a skirmish. Anyway, guys, those are kind of my last update and just kind of some lingering questions I have. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. I'd always appreciate that. It does help the channel, and it makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside. If you are interested in more hate updates, I will be posting one on the 16th when the Kickstarter goes live, trying to answer these questions and update with additional information, where they're heading with stretch goals, how they're doing on funding, all that kind of stuff, with updates strewn about as it progresses. Additionally, I do a lot of other board game reviews. I have several coming up, especially next month in February, as well as the hobby of miniature painting. So subscribe if you want to see more like that. I will be posting plenty there. Additionally, if you do want to actually support beyond that, you are able to head over to my Patreon. It starts at $1 a month, that's $12 a year, but it goes up from there depending on kind of either how you want to support or the benefits you want. So I do voting there where you can vote for future videos. I offer chances to really just kind of sit and chat and discuss. We could discuss anything from future video ideas to, featured content or whatever. Maybe just curious about my life or my story behind doing this kind of stuff. Either way, that's there. You can win miniatures. So I do offer the ability to send out painted miniatures that I paint. So you can get those. It all depends on kind of what you want to do. You can look there if you want, but regardless, thanks so much for watching. I always appreciate it. I hope you found this informative and helpful. I hope that you can join me on this journey through hate It's an odd sentence, but I really do, that we can just kind of go through this together and learn more about it, get it together, paint it together, do all that kind of stuff, review it, discuss how it ended up, all that jazz. Anyway, guys, thanks so much. I appreciate it. I'll talk to you again next time.